I'm in the process of changing over my 1963 Ford 2000 tractor from a 6-volt generator to a 12-volt alternator. And I've came across a couple things I just wanted to mention right quick that may help you out if you're doing a 12-volt conversion. The 6-volt generator is using an external voltage regulator. This generator has 3 wires that go to it. One's for the armature, one's for the field, and one's for the ground. This field wire will be deleted altogether. You won't use that. The aftermarket 12-volt alternator that you can get, I suggest getting one of the what they call a one-wire alternator. It has a internal voltage regulator, and you'll use your armature wire for the power wire on that alternator. The ground wire is kind of optional. When you bolt up the alternator, it'll ground to the brackets, but you can take your ground wire and ground it to the new alternator just for a extra security for ground. The voltage regulator is up under the hood, back up against the steering column right here. The voltage regulator will have 3 terminals on it. Depending on your year, they may be located differently, but on mine, this is the battery terminal, the field, and the armature. The field you can delete altogether. You won't be using that. What I did on mine, I took the wires loose from the battery end of it and the wires loose from the armature end of it, and I connected them together. By doing that, it's basically just bypassing this voltage regulator, because that voltage regulator sits in between the generator and the battery to regulate the voltage. So by the new alternator being internally regulated, we don't need one, and we can just connect them together. That was my field wire right there. I'm just going to pull that all the way out. And what I did, I soldered my wires together and I just wrapped them up in tape. If you want to, you can rewire your tractor to avoid doing this, but since my wires are in good shape and all, I just soldered them together to connect everything together to bypass the regulator. With 6-volt wiring system, 6 volts draws twice the amperage as a 12-volt. So your 6-volt actually have thicker gauge wire on it than the 12-volt. So if the wire's in good shape for the 6-volt, then it'll work all right for the 12-volt. The original 6-volt starter will work on the 12-volt system. This starter is going to spin much faster with the 12-volt. So if the tractor doesn't want to start, don't try starting it for a long period of time. As long as you're just starting it up and it fires right up, you should be okay with that 6-volt starter. You're going to have to replace all the lights on the tractor. The 6-volt lights are not going to work with the 12-volt. It's going to blow them. The bulb on the back light for a 12-volt system is a number 1156 bulb. It's just a single filament bulb. As far as the ignition coil, you got a couple different options. This is the original 6-volt coil right here. You can use this, but you have to get a resistor to put in line in between the battery and the coil, or you can buy a newer 12-volt coil to put on it. I have a 12-volt coil on hand, so that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to swap this out for a 12-volt coil. This is my original front headlight on the tractor. It's a 6-volt, and what I got to replace it with, I got all my parts at Napa. This is the Napa part number right there. And this is a 12-volt light. It's meant for a car. These tractor headlights are meant to be as kind of like a floodlight, and you can go on eBay and order these as a 12-volt. But I just went ahead and got this one from Napa, and I want to see how it does on the tractor. This is a 12-volt single filament bulb. One thing I'm probably going to have to do, you can see these terminals are bent back like this to give it clearance. So I'm just going to take a pair of needle nose pliers and bend these back in the way that these are bent. And I'm going to change out the connectors on the wires on the tractor to these style. That way they'll slip on here. These are the only ones I had on hand, and these were a little bit wider, so I just filed them down a little bit to where these connectors would slide on. This is the alternator that I'm going to be using. Here's the Napa part number right here. It's just got a single V-groove pulley on it. Already has a fan on it. Here's the post right here. They'll be running to the battery to charge it. It has two mounting points right here. It already came with a bolt for that one. On top of the alternator right here, it has this plug. This is for an optional terminal plug on it. And from my research, the connector that would connect to this would have a red wire and a white wire that goes to it. The white wire you could connect to a amp meter, but from everything I've seen, if you take a jumper wire, connect this post to the charging post on the alternator, it'll make it to where this alternator will charge at low RPMs. And a lot of times your tractor's running at a lower RPM when it's idling. So I'm going to do that too, just like that. You see, I put one of these female blade terminals on one end and a eye-bolt connector on the other. And another thing you're going to need to replace is the starter solenoid. This is a 6-volt one. You're going to need to go to a 12-volt. This 12-volt starter solenoid is very popular on a lot of Ford vehicles. This is the Napa part number right here. Nice and shiny. On the 6-volt system on my tractor, I had a positive ground. Since I'm going from 6-volt to 12-volt, it's going to be going to a negative ground, just like a normal automotive battery. The original starter button here worked by when you push this, it grounded this wire to the case. And since this no longer has a positive ground system on its negative ground, this won't no longer work. So I went ahead and just wired in that wire to a 3-way switch with a start position on it, like an automotive type switch. I know that bypasses the safety on it, but as of right now I have no other option. It's just I got to be very mindful when I go to start the tractor to make sure it's in neutral so the tractor doesn't roll when I go to start it. My new alternator bolted up to the original mounts on the tractor. It doesn't sit quite far enough forwards. You can see how it's sitting back a little bit. And also, it doesn't have quite enough length on this this adjustment arm where you can adjust it. Don't have quite enough length to it. So what I'm going to have to do is make a spacer, bring this out. I got to measure it by, it's probably about 1/2 inch. This needs to come forwards, and then make a 1/2 inch spacer here, and then make an arm that's probably about 1 inch longer. That way I have enough room to adjust the slack out of the belt. My bottom mount for the old generator, I took it off and just flipped it around the opposite way. That way this shorter end sticking out, because I don't have to bolt the alternator to the front of this to bring it up close enough to the belt. So I just took that off and flipped it around. engine off. My voltage is 12.74. What I'm going to do is start the tractor up, then check the voltage again to make sure the alternator is charging. If it's charging, the voltage will be higher than this. If it's not charging, it'll be a little bit lower than this because the ignition coil will be draining power off the battery. So I started it up and it's not charging. So what I'm doing, I'm going to go ahead and I'm taking this charging wire loose that went to the rest of the wiring of the tractor. I'm taking it loose. I cut it out of the rest of the wiring harness, and I'm just going to make a wire that goes straight from that post on the alternator to that top post on the solenoid that goes to the battery cable. So I'm going to have that just directly wired to that. And I'm also going to take the bottom bracket here. I'm going to clean it up on the wire wheel, and I'll take a wire wheel and clean up where it bolts onto the engine block to make sure the ground is good too. After cleaning up them grounds, it's now charging. I got 13.5 volts. That is good. After some fine tuning, that's the voltage that I got out of the alternator now. So my new 12 volt ignition coil, it said on it to use an external resistor. And when I first put it on and cranked it up, I didn't have this ballast resistor on here. I gotta find a permanent mounting place for it. I just got zip tied to a spark plug wire for the time being. But I didn't have this on here at first. When I first cranked it up, it ran fine, and then it started running really rough and then wouldn't run at all. And when I went into the distributor, the ignition points in the distributor were melted. The plastic cam rider on the points had completely melted. It done closed the gap up all the way. So I went in here, I put new points and condenser in them. I set the points gap at 25 thousandths, put it all back together. Then I added this ballast resistor in the line, and now it's running good.